Everyone knows that we're going to do 56 and 112 first.
Representative Kinner.
Here.
Oh, thank you. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Schwartz. Representative Simpson.
Here.
I knew he was here somewhere. Representative Stiff.
Here.
Representative Walters. Chairman Nicholas.
Here. Okay, first up, Senate File 56, Lottery Amendments. Mr. Chairman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill comes to you, lottery amendments from the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovations. This bill goes. Oh, is that close enough? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill comes to you from your Select Committee on Blockchain. We are looking at the lottery. This bill goes into 9-17-108 and allows for payment into a special lottery for virtual currency. So payment in is virtual currency, presumably payment out in the same way, as approved by the board. So what that means is the board, which I'm sure will speak to you, Mr. Chairman, can decide which currencies, if any, to allow into that lottery. The rest of the language in the bill conforms to that change. And, oh, I should back up, Mr. Chairman. This bill keeps the, makes very clear the prohibition on the use of other payments options, which have traditionally been held by the legislature, by policy. Payment by check, debit card, credit card, charge card, and other forms of payments shall be prohibited. That was just some cleanup language in the statute. It's always been there as an is prohibited. And Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. We certainly take any questions on it.
Questions? So have you met with the folks at Lottery and walked through what's going to be involved in this process and what rulemaking, how soon they can launch it, how it's going to work?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we did in fact, one of our select committee members works closely with the lottery, obviously Mr. Kaufman. And so while this bill worked through the interim, we had vibrant participation and discussion with them. In terms of standing it up, some of that may have changed since our interim, but my understanding was that they would getting ready, moving it forward. The biggest impediment, if any, would be the POS system that you would have to be able to accept crypto. And I think there's different ways and methods to do that. I think you'd probably be best to ask them about where they're at on that, because I know there were some differing opinions on whether you would need a physical machine or just a software change.
So, Chairman Olson, if you wouldn't mind for me, just give me a little history of why this come forward. I mean, is this in anticipation of or in response to the need there? Just help me understand.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, it was brought to us as a request jointly through lottery with organizations that were interested in partnering with lottery to create this set aside lottery. So yeah, we as the committee ourselves did not generate the idea. It was brought to us by them.
Okay, public comment, please come on up. Come on, Pat.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Matt Kaufman, attorney with Hathaway and Coons here in Cheyenne and outside legal counsel for the Wyoming Lottery. It's been a little while since I've been in front of you all. It's good to see you. Mr. Chairman, just to respond to a couple of the questions and Chairman Olson's comments, it's exactly right. This is intended to be sort of a preliminary step to authorize the virtual currency payments. Lottery is looking down the road at some alternatives for a lottery style crypto game. So this would enable payments in that form. There is absolutely no plan of any kind at this point in time to ask retailers at a C-store to be able to accept or facilitate crypto payments of any kind. So that's not going to be a requirement. The other aspect, which I know this committee knows a little something about, is just the emergence and the continual growth of folks wanting to use dollar-backed stable tokens for commerce and things like that. So this was another avenue to enable the lottery to capture some of that revenue in the future. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
So you haven't done any preliminary studies on standing this up and what it would cost? And the real question is how much it would it cost? So theoretically, it may impact the revenues that we generate on that. So that's the real question is, will it impact ongoing revenues?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to answer that question directly, no studies have been conducted yet to perform that full analysis. What the lottery has engaged in, though, as this committee is well aware, we've got a number of SPDIs, special purpose depository institutions, banks that are currently in the process of being stood up. At this point in time, we know that a number of them are planning to be able to facilitate virtual currency payments and administration. So part of this is a little bit dependent upon the ecosystem that's being built out right now in Wyoming for that reason, so that there would be marginal cost.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kaufman, when the lottery was originally set up, the reason for using cash only was to kind of help prevent folks from overspending on lottery tickets by limiting their ability to not use credit cards and whatnot. Would this open an opportunity for an individual to overspend their monthly budget, you might say, by using a virtual currency?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for the question. So in our estimation, no. The predominant style or method right now of settlement with various digital assets is they're much like a bearer instrument. So they're like cash dollars in that respect. So someone could spend their crypto at this point in time. It's hard to conceive of a way that they would do that on credit, quite frankly. So it would be much like a cash style payment.
Further questions? Okay. I'll swallow my banana. All right. Anybody else on public comment? Any other public comment? All right. I see none. We'll close public comment. We have a motion on the bill.
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Stith, seconded by Representative Larson. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. Roll call.
Representative Kenner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
No.
Representative Stith,
Aye.
Representative Walters,
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 no.
Okay, and you'll carry that on the floor? All right. Next is Senate File 112. This is the reports. Anyone to present this to us? We kind of know it. It's our own bill. So any discussion on the reports bill from the public? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Go ahead.
Just for the benefit of the public, what we've done here is, if I may, is within the budget bill, we oftentimes have conditions there and there that requires agencies or the different offices to report back to us on the appropriations. And we're trying to refrain or resist the temptation of putting all these reports in the budget bill. And so now we've created these report bills. Encapsulates, grabs all of those and puts them in a bill so that we can accomplish the same thing, keep the budget bill clean. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll close public comment. We have a motion on the bill. Moved by Representative Walters, seconded by Representative Kenner. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to add one more report as an amendment. So I would move that amendment as to include a study on and report back on cash-based budgeting And that report would come to Cap Fin.
And so to facilitate the drafting of the amendment, would it be a friendly amendment to use the language in the budget bill?
Mr. Chairman, that would be very friendly.
Okay.
I think that would be great.
And that way we got easy, consistent language that you can grab and stick in.
So does that make it a section 9? Is that? Then you've got
Correct.
words somewhere.
We'll find them.
We'll show it to you. Okay, everyone understand the amendment? Any further discussion on the amendment?
Second.
Evan has a
Go
question.
ahead, Evan.
Representative Walters, given the late date here with just 4.5 days left, if this goes to a conference committee, I'm worried about the whole bill being lost due to time. Are you sure you want to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's prudent. We'll have time to get it addressed.
All right.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Any other amendments? Seeing none. Roll call, please, as amended.
Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
Aye.
Representative Stith,
Aye.
Representative Walters, Chairman Nicholas.
Aye.
All ayes do pass as amended.
Okay. Next, we have Senate File 82. Come on up. Joy Floyd.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Senate File 82 is a supplemental water funding bill that was put together by Select Water Committee back in September. Since that time, a lot of things have changed, Mr. Chairman. You'll notice from the original bill that was filed that the Senate reduced that appropriation by about $84 million from the original bill. And so as it comes over in gross, there's only 3 projects that remain in the bill at this time. Mr. Chairman, if I could walk you through those under section 1. First project is $25 million on water development account. And this is for the Fontenelle project, which was to acquire additional space in Fontenelle Reservoir. I would remind the committee that I think we're all aware of the fact that the Colorado River is in a protracted long-term drought. Pretty severe consequences. Through the governor's office, he's established a working group to look at this. Right now, based on the best estimates going forward, the state of Wyoming is looking at somewhere between 25 and 75 million on a worst case scenario deficit should there be a curtailment on the Colorado River. One of the strategic assets that Wyoming has is Fontenelle Reservoir. And what this would allow us to do, Fontenelle is a 396,000 acre foot reservoir. Currently under contract, the only contractor in there is the state of Wyoming. We have contracts with the Bureau of Reclamation. Currently, those 4 contracts that we execute are for the Trona industry and also for Pacific Corp for the Jim Brager power plant. The implications of a curtailment or a demand management program on the Colorado are much greater than just the implications to our heavy industry in the Green River Basin. Our largest municipality, the city of Cheyenne, gets 40% of their surface drinking water out of the Colorado. They have a junior water rights to almost all other users within the Colorado River Basin. It would create a significant hardship on those, whether we end up in either a curtailment or a demand management program. The Green River Joint Powers Board, again, one of our 5th largest municipalities, gets all of their water out of the Green River Basin. Fontenelle Reservoir, if we were to contract with the Bureau of Reclamation for the remainder of the space in there, would provide some flexibility for the state of Wyoming to mitigate some of those impacts going forward, if and when they should happen. I would emphasize, Mr. Chairman, it's not so much if, it's when. And so what that would allow the state to do is enter into a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation for the majority of that space within Fontenelle. And the water bill that already passed out of here, there was money there through negotiations between the state and the Bureau of Reclamation to start the environmental impact process now to allow the state to acquire that additional space. This appropriation, upon a favorable record of decision by the Bureau of Reclamation, would allow the Water Development Commission to enter into an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation for that storage. Mr. Chairman, I'd also remind the committee that all of the other basin states are aware that there's a large pot of water that's uncontracted within that reservoir. So I do think there is some urgency on the state of Wyoming's part to try to expedite the process and get as much of that water under contract as possible. Mr. Chairman, the second one in there under subsection Romanet 2 is $21,800,000 for the Goshen Irrigation District's Tunnel 1 and Tunnel 2 rehabilitation program. Mr. Chairman, we're all aware of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the collapse of those tunnels that created some economic havoc. Again, the estimated loss of the economy associated with that, had we lose that, is somewhere around $90 million to the state of Wyoming. This money is 21.8, is one half, because that tunnel serves both Nebraska and the state of Wyoming. 49% of the land's irrigated under this canal, or in Wyoming, 51% are in Nebraska. This would be Wyoming's portion, bar any other costs that the district has already absorbed. They have taken out loans from the bank. They do have a project right now looking at the final engineering and design on this. And then, Mr. Chairman, the third project is $30 million appropriations for the La Prairie Dam. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the La Prairie Dam is currently under an order by the state of Wyoming that they cannot fill to capacity. And I don't remember exactly, but I believe it's around 40 or 50%. Inspection of the dam a couple of years ago shows that there's significant cracks in the dam. Consequently, they're under order not to fill that facility. It is a high hazard dam because downstream of it is I-25, and under a catastrophic failure, the potential is to completely take I-25 out. Now, Mr. Chairman, I would tell you there is some significant movement associated with this. We do believe this project is eligible under the Infrastructure Act that's currently been passed. The governor's office has already submitted a letter requesting funding. All told, it's close to $100 million project. That application is in. We're waiting on a response back from Washington, D.C. of using those federal funds under the Infrastructure Act. So, Mr. Chairman, I think bar waiting for that letter, that may be something that we could, even if we were to receive the funds today, we still have to do the final. We've done preliminary engineering, some preliminary geotech work. As probably another year and a half, 2 years out for reconstruction. And that is a complete reconstruction of that facility. There's some geologic problems with the current situation where we still have potential landslides on top of the dam. So the current configuration is to move that downstream and construct an entire new dam and then reduce the portion of that dam, not complete removal, but enough that will allow it to go ahead and function appropriately. We're waiting. I think that's a project, Mr. Chairman, that we could probably hold back from until we get a decision on the Infrastructure Act. But Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. Those three projects, I'd stand for any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, on number 2, the Goshen Irrigation District tunnels, what's the timeline on construction there?
Mr. Chairman, if the engineering moves forward, we would anticipate potentially as early as the fall of 2023. So not this fall, but next fall, Mr. Chairman. But to get there, we would have to have, they're working on the final designs right now. They've got preliminary designs. These are based on the engineer's estimates of what it's going to do to do both tunnels. Was a little over $44 million. So this gets us halfway, which is Wyoming's share. If bar any permit hiccups or any delays associated with the Bureau of Reclamation, we would hope that this would be under construction by the fall of 2023. Anybody that's familiar with large water projects and federal permitting knows there's always that potential for delays out there.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know what the status of our neighbor state with the 51%? Have they approved funding for this also?
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak to that issue. If I need to, I could fall a friend. I know those discussions have been ongoing since the collapse between our governor and the governor of Nebraska, and both of the irrigation districts have been in detailed discussion, Mr. Chairman, but the specifics to the question, have they obligated funds? I cannot answer that question at this point in time. I would ask the director or interim director. So the answer to the question is we don't know yet.
Yeah.
What Nebraska, have they've obligated those funds or not?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, on the Goshen Irrigation District project, is there any local match by the local irrigation district contemplated?
Mr. Chairman, on which project?
The Goshen Irrigation District tunnels.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't seen the last financial sheet from that. But typically underwater development, they can only go up to a maximum of 75% grant, 25% loan. So the limitations of that program would be in place. They did early on incur some significant debt. They borrowed money to get an immediate fix. So I'm anticipating under the criteria of the program to participate, they're going to have to come up with a 25% match, but I would turn that unless the legislature, we always reserve the right to do different. And we've done that on some of these large projects before. The last one that comes to mind is Gillette Medicine Project, where we just funded a significant portion of that out of AML funds. And then there was a small portion, I think small being $20 million appropriation out of water development. And I don't remember what the terms on that, but I would ask the director if he's got the answer to that question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, I would agree with what Senator Hicks has said. Typically it's 75-25. And they would probably be looking at other federal funding if it's available for this project to use for some of that matching funds against state dollars.
So, Mr.
That
Chairman,
has not been identified yet.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. So the total project cost is 44 million. If Nebraska is going to pay half of it, then do you need, and if there's a local match of 25%, you wouldn't need 21 million, right? You'd need some number less than that, right?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer that question, I think it's the question that has come back before this committee on every building project that we have. This budget was projected based on an engineer's estimate a year ago. We know what inflation has done, what material cost has done, and everything else. And so not dissimilar to a lot of other building projects that we're looking at. I can probably anticipate that we're looking at 20% more than what's in this budget, because those are engineering estimates from less than a year, prior to where we're currently at. But I would ask for any clarification on that.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Please,
may,
go ahead.
Brandon Gebhardt, current state engineer, former director of water development. When we were looking at these funds originally too, part of the thought was that if we could provide a loan with this appropriation, then that may give the district a better opportunity to gain funding through a loan portion too, which would require the full appropriation of the 49%. It gets complex, but that was also contemplated in being able to provide a loan to Goshen as well with that.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can just clarify, under the existing appropriation, the way that would be potentially broke out as 75-25, 75% grant, 25% loan at 4% for up to 30 years under the existing criteria. And this is pretty common through water development to grant the 67 to 75% that they have discretion on, and then loan the money at 4% back to those entities. And so under that scenario, 25% of this appropriation would be a loan at 4%, and they can go up to 30 years under statutory construct for the program. Does that make sense, Mr. Chairman?
Follow.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That makes sense. the part that doesn't make sense is once the general funds are transferred to the water development account, there's nothing here that says that they would then, that 25% would pay back the general fund. It would just simply pay back the water development account. And so the water development account is ultimately a net winner in this situation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, certainly that 25% loan could be directed back to the general fund if it was the inclination of the committee to do so.
Go ahead.
So Senator Hicks or Director Gephardt, I don't know, one of you, so what I'm trying to get in my head is on the Goshen project is where these are general fund dollars, if we need to do the appropriation now. You addressed La Prairie, and I have a question there, but you kind of addressed that, said we've got some room to wait there. On the 21.8 on Goshen, right now in your water bill, in your other water bill, you've got some money in there for the it says for the engineering analysis, design, permit, procurement. And so as I read that, I'm just wanting to make sure that that's just not a stamped language. So has the engineering analysis been completed?
Are you, Mr. Chairman, are you speaking to Goshen or?
Yes,
to
Goshen.
Fontenelle?
Mhm.
I would turn over to the director on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the request that you're talking about for design, that is in this year's omnibus bill. So if that is approved, then that portion will start.
Okay, so thank you. And so the engineering hasn't started, waiting for that appropriation. You'll do the analysis and then the project land procurement as kind of outlined. And so if I'm reading that right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. And so how long is that something that you'll get completed and have done in the next year? Or is that something we could save these general fund dollars and then look at that in the supplemental budget?
Mr. Chairman, the last discussion I had with the engineer that's been hired by Goshen Irrigation District thought it would take anywhere from a year to a year and a half to complete the final design. So if it's a year, then they could be ready for that fall 2023. If it's a year and a half, maybe it pushes to 2024.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then if I could come back, Senator Hicks, on the La Prairie dam, you talked about possibly using infrastructure money to do that. And I was just curious if that was going to require any kind of match from the state, if there's something that we need to consider.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to phone a friend on,
Okay.
or pass the hot potato, whatever you prefer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, the language in the infrastructure bill wasn't clear, so we don't know. That is one of the questions that we've got, whether there's match money to that or not.
And in follow, Mr. Chairman, so if I heard correctly, timeframe on that, if there was a match, we could address that in the supplemental budget if we needed to figure that
Mr.
out.
Chairman, I expect that we'll get an answer from Washington within the next couple of weeks, is what I'm hearing. And so then that would be available. And I don't know where we're at as far as timeline of the design being ready to use construction dollars or not. We have a year's worth of work probably, and NEPA, so.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the simple answer to the question is most likely would not go to construction in 2022.
Correct.
Even if we got approval in 2 weeks to move forward. So the answer to your question is we could probably address this in the supplemental when we're back here to
If
do
we
the
needed
actual
matching
construction
dollars.
dollars.
Yeah, okay.
But Mr. Chairman, I would point out that we're pretty shy on construction dollars for dams right now and they count. So, but
Mr.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adding on to that, I think there's also 75 million available in our current budget bill for matching dollars towards infrastructure projects. So if this was not there, there may be access to other dollars through the governor's office.
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, same question. And It's my understanding that the Wyoming Water Development Commission estimated the LaPrelle Dam project to cost $60 million. So this appropriates $30 million, which seems like kind of just an awkward number. If you get mostly federal funds, then you don't need 30. But if you don't get any federal funds, then 30 is not enough. So, I mean, what do we get out of this $30 million, I guess? And to make it a more specific question, if there is federal match, what's the ratio, if you know?
Mr. Chairman, I think the last time we looked at the cost, it was between 60 and 80, and I'm guessing now it's on that higher end. So we were, I think, contemplating looking at match money with this 30 million. We knew it would not fund the entire construction, but it was to open up other federal funding.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. So if there is a federal match requirement or available, do you have an understanding whether that's 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3, any idea?
Mr. Chairman, we don't know the answer to that yet.
Go ahead.
So then, Senator Hicks, I'd like to kind of come back to a conversation you and I had last night and help me on Fontenelle, the first one on this project. If I understood correctly, it sounds like most of the irrigators in that area have water rights that precede the building of that reservoir. But the big impacts are industry and municipalities that have developed their water infrastructure based on the capacity of that dam. Am I recalling that accurately?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just real quick walk through. So we're subject to the 1923 Colorado River Compact that divided the upper basin and the lower basin up. And the upper basin is the states of New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. And we're obligated under that compact to deliver a certain amount of water. What we know is that the hydrology has been going down for well over a decade. And we've drained, if you've been down to Lake Powell or been to Lake Mead, they're just bathtub rings, and those continue to drop. So 1923 is the important date because any water right that existed prior to the compact will not be affected if the lower basin states call the upper basin states out, or we enter into a program to try to do voluntary curtailments to preclude that. You still are looking at those. So under a compact call, anything that's predates 1923 can't be called out by a lower basin state. Within the Green River Basin, probably we've got the numbers, but it's close to 90% of all the agricultural water rights are pre-compact. So those are pretty secure water rights. So under our prior appropriation doctrine, as the last person with the water right is the first person that comes off. And so you think back to all that irrigated ground was broken out as we settled that country in the 1890s and early 1900s. So all those late users, the city of Cheyenne has water rights that are like 79, 82 when they did the trans-basin diversion. Some really small pre that. But then you bring in the heavy industrial users that didn't exist. Those are the first guys regulated off of the system, or the first guys that have to go buy supplemental water someplace to be able to continue. And so it is our big thermal coal generation facility. Bridger Coal is junior, City of Cheyenne's junior, Green River Rock Springs is junior. All the Trone Industries are junior on that. What we think is Fontenelle gives us a buffer because of that excess capacity in there that would either whether we do demand management, it could be part of that program, depending on how we operate it. But certainly under a curtailment, if we retain access to that pool, it could significantly offset any cost of those other industries for a period of 4 to 7 years.
Further questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I just add on one quick thing?
Please.
To that point, one of the options that a junior right may have is to do a temporary change with an irrigator. So if the Trona mine does not shut off, then they're paying to shut off some ag. So ag could potentially on the backside be affected by this as well.
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Chairman, that is correct, because we do have in our Wyoming water law that anything that's post 1944 gets double their appropriation. And it would subject those irrigators to the loss of that 1944 water right also under Wyoming law.
So I've got a few questions on these. First of all, on the Fontenelle, I'm curious what, if we go and try to negotiate with the Bureau to purchase these water rights, what would prohibit, or how can we prohibit other states from doing the same thing and coming in? It seems to me that if they are going to negotiate with Wyoming, they probably have a duty to make it, to go to the highest bidder, to go to downstream states. So how does that work?
Mr. Chairman, that's one of the questions we have into the Bureau right now. One concept, and I think it's the one we're hopeful for, is that Fontenelle was developed for Wyoming uses. And so there may be limitations on them seeking outside states to participate in that. That's a question we're trying to get answered, but that could be a potential.
That is a political question, probably. And how would we have anywhere near the political clout of the downstream users and the need for domestic water downstream?
So, Mr. Chairman, again, I'll just build on what the state engineer said. If you go back to the authorizing legislation for Fontenelle, you gentlemen that have been here for a while will remember when the Bureau of Reclamation come in and withdrew those hundreds of thousand acres that were supposed to be irrigated under that. That water was, as part of that large irrigation project, was designated for the state of Wyoming. But Mr. Chairman, I think your point is the point that we need to address. If we don't get this under contract, the opportunity will probably go away. And then the cost to our municipalities and our industries could be significant. So this is a very proactive approach to strategically pace Wyoming, so the scenario that you just described does not happen.
Well, by making them the offer and asking to negotiate directly opens the door, the Pandora's box also. I mean, it can go both ways. As soon as we do it, then California or someone could say, well, we'll pay 50 million for it. We'll pay 100 million for it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, under the compact, I don't think California would be eligible for that water. But it, again.
Well, that's my question is that's what I want to understand. Why would they not be? And also would take a congressional act to make them eligible, I presume.
And so, Mr. Chairman, the answer to your question, I think, is the Upper Colorado River Compact in 1944. And so you've got the 23 compact between all the entire Colorado River Basin, and then that was further segregated with the Upper Colorado River Compact in 1944. Currently, the lower basin, because they're administered by the Bureau of Reclamation, and the upper basin is administered by states and state water law. And bar curtailment, because right now that's pretty much federal water sitting in that reservoir. But bar the provisions in the upper basin and lower basin, it is a legal question that would come in as, in fact, that water could or should be delivered to a lower basin state under the compact. That becomes a legal question. What we're trying to do is be proactive and make sure that that legal question never has to be answered, because we've exercised our rights to the reservoir.
So what you're suggesting, and I'd like to get your opinion on, is that the compact provides that we should have the opportunity to acquire it. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, that's the way I would view the current configuration of the upper compact and part of the CRISP, Colorado River Storage and Act, that all of these reservoirs were built under the Bureau of Reclamation, which wasn't specific to Fontenelle, but Navajo, Blue Mesa, Flaming Gorge were all part of those projects long-term. Fontenelle came along a little bit later, but again.
So then my next question is, what would prevent us from going in and negotiating here we're putting a price tag on it that is visible. And yet, whatever that price is, my guess is the state of Wyoming will try pony up to the bar to do it. What purpose is there to appropriate dollars now for a negotiation that in all likelihood could take years to put together and then put a price tag on it?
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the benefits that we look at when we contract the water, we get more of a say in how that water could be used. If it's remains under the ownership of the Bureau of Reclamation, then they have.
But I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. That's not answering my question.
Okay.
I'm saying, why don't you go negotiate it, figure out what the price is, and then come back and ask us for those dollars, as opposed to just putting money in a box over here, and they'll see how much money we have sitting there, which will affect the negotiation.
And Mr. Chairman, we've started that process, and part of our construction, or one of the omnibus bills, we have an additional set of money that we're entering into a contributing funds agreement with the Bureau to do just that. That starts us down the road negotiation. It'll pay for some NEPA to see what we can use the water for. And we suspect that we will be ready to ink that contributing funds agreement just as soon as the omnibus bill is passed or shortly thereafter. So within the next couple of months, we believe we'll be in a contributing funds agreement with the Bureau. And so then we'll go through that process. And then the next step is for us to say, we would like to possibly purchase this additional amount of money. And so this gives us basically the negotiating power to say we can afford this much at this price.
So if we had a provision that simply authorized the governor after the negotiation to take money out of LISRA to do it, it would effectuate the same thing, as opposed to the way this, right now, we've got that balanced budget, but all this 82 million won't come from general fund. It'll end up pouring over, it'll tip in and drain out of LISRA at some point in time. Because we don't have any $83 million in the general fund at the moment. So to me, and this goes back to you, is there any difference to you on where the money comes from?
Mr. Chairman, it really does, from a standpoint that this is already into the budget. We've already profiled this into the general fund. We know where we're at. It's part of the $2.7 billion we've already profiled. We've already profiled what, 175 million out of the LSRA. We know that we're going down in our savings account. It seems to me it would be prudent to go ahead and appropriate the money. It's already been profiled. It's part of our general fund budget. Go ahead and do that, and then leave our LSRA where it says, in case we have a significant downturn. This committee, the Appropriations Committee, can always reach back, in fact, if this is delayed, and reappropriate those funds if they needed to into the future. So.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Senator, I'm not that I ever have doubted your statements, but I'm online trying to follow. And it refers to a 1948 compact of the Upper Basin, and I don't see a 1944.
Mr. Chairman, if I said 44, I believe it's 48.
Okay.
I misspoke.
So on the LaPrelle project, are the beneficiaries, the water right holders, already tapped out on their contribution to the irrigation district?
Mr. Chairman, I would defer on that. I haven't seen the entire budget for that project as far as breakout as contributions.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer, but that is one of the things that we are evaluating through this process right now.
And so I'm curious, how much detail did the Select Water Committee dive into all three of these projects before this bill came out?
Mr. Chairman, how much time do you have? Specific to the GID, we've been involved with this discussion since the tunnels collapsed 3 years ago. At just about every meeting that the Select Water Committee has had with water development, it's been an ongoing thing, trying to initially find stabilization and then financing packages and negotiating with the Bureau of Reclamation. So this has been quite a journey to get to where we're at now with GID. We knew that we had the safety of dams order on La Prielle. We actually had a joint committee meeting in Douglas this summer. We did with the consultants, with La Prielle Irrigation District and the Water Development, and went inside the dam and actually toured the structural impediments to that facility. It is under an order under safety of dams right now. So it was been brought to our attention a couple of years ago. We did a deep dive into that this last summer.
And then my next question is, why wouldn't you use part of like Water 3 for La Prelle and where are the balance of those funds? You know,
Mr.
we've
Chairman?
got 95 million expended in water projects. And it seems to me that some of that money could have been directed towards these larger projects.
Mr. Chairman, we specifically asked that question on the ARP, and irrigation is not an eligible expenditure. And that's why we don't have ARP money in here, either direct. We were looking at the conserved dollars, part of those conserved dollars to potentially fund some of these projects.
I mean, Water 1, Water 2, and Water 3.
Water 3 is at the point where there's only 11 million in there. We've got 3, 4 ongoing projects. Again, reckon back to our discussion on inflation costs ongoing with those projects. If you look to the original bill, we had additional money in there for those projects also. But right now we've tapped the Buffalo Bill account. We have a structural deficit for account 1, which funds all the rehab, so you guys are aware of the fact that we are now funding the Board of Control out of water development account. That's been a $54 million drain the last 3 bienniums. And so as a result of that, we're underwater in account 1. We have very little reserves left in account 3, which is the construction account. And if we run into significant cost overruns, account 3 will be drained. And we're already using what our Buffalo Bill and diverting those into both account 1 and account 3. There's more demand than there is money, Mr. Chairman, across the board. Hopefully, with some of these funds that we've appropriated through the ARP funds and the clean water infrastructure money, will alleviate those municipal projects. But Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, you will recall a study that was done over a year ago. We have over $1 billion of aging irrigation infrastructure in the state of Wyoming. This is just a modest first step to try to address that while the state of Wyoming has a little bit of funding available.
So as I understand it, if we pass this bill, we'll have expended well in excess of all of the conserved dollars all through by doing this. So it'll be just general fund dollars in essence.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're correct on the ARPA. We do know that with the current prices of an oil and natural gas that we're looking at a little above revenues than anticipated to come in. It is general fund money. I do think we should I would make a recommendation. The committee may want to consider pulling the 30 million out of La Prielle until we get a decision from the federal government as to whether that's eligible or not. That frees up a little bit more space in there. But Mr. Chairman, I would be hesitant to remove the other 2 from general fund at this time.
Okay, further questions? Go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just have to say, the first Colorado River Compact was Compact of 1922. I just had to say that.
Not 23.
Mr. Chairman, what's a year or 2 when you get as old as me and you are? Once you get over 60, another year doesn't mean much.
Okay, any other questions? Any other public comment on this Senate File 82? So what I think we'll set this back a day. I've got a couple amendments that we're going to work into this. And we've got some folks here that really want to hit the next bill. So we'll close public comment, and Larry, we'll let you know when we bring in the amendments so you can look at it.
Thank you, members, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. We look forward to your amendments.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they might want to tailor it so it fits differently, but we'll let her figure it out. Okay, next we have change in party affiliation, Senate File 97. Senator Biden, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee, Senator Beitman, Senate District 21, bringing you change in party affiliation, Senate File 97. Ask for your favorable vote. Gentlemen, this bill, you've seen this a time or two in the last 5-6 years. It's pretty much the same bill. It accomplishes three things in order to restore election integrity to our primary election process. Obviously, the first thing it does is it stops the same day party switching that we've seen happen recently in recent elections. It also goes back and pushes out the cutoff from what is currently 2 weeks before the primary to about 3 months. It goes out to May, which is the day before the candidate filing period begins. So between that date and the primary election, you will no longer be able to switch party affiliations. And then it also, if you look at page 1 of the bill, it also closes a loophole where the previous bills overlooked, whereas it would allow up until this bill, it would allow somebody that wanted to get around this requirement to just cancel their affiliation and then re-register on the day of to do an in-run around the current rules. So this would prevent you from canceling in order to just re-register as a different party to get around the rules. So I'll walk you through the bill. Oh, and then the engrossed version you're looking at, what we did in the Senate side was, if you look on page 3, line 2, it's used to say not later than the first day on which an application for nomination may be filed. We've changed it to up to. So just the technical correction on that. That's kind of how the bill was drafted at first. Somehow it got switched around and then we're back to up to. So that's the only thing that changed from the original bill draft to the engrossed. So page 1, like I said, at the bottom of page 1.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could you go back? Where does this change? I'm not
It
catching
should
it.
be on page 3, line 2. Do you see? I don't have my engrossed version with me.
There's no,
We'd
no
say-
up to language in it on line 2. That's why I'm lost.
Oh, it says prior to, I'm sorry. So on the engrossed version, it reads, signed before a notary or election official and filing it with the county clerk prior to the first day. That was the change, prior to. It used to read not later than. So, thank you. So I'll just go off this engrossed version. That'll be easier. 22-3-115, this is the grounds for cancellation, which I just described. Closes that loophole. It says on page 2, lines, starting at lines 1 through 3. At any time except for the period which the party changes are prohibited. Specified in 22-5-214, which if you look down at 22-5-214, this is the change in party affiliation statute, which is the meat of the bill. And that changes it to, like I said, the day before nominations begin in May. And with that, yeah, that's the bill. The why obviously is because we've seen in recent elections a concerted effort by people that have no intentions of being with one party, but they want to influence the outcome of that particular party's primary election. And I don't think that's right. And a lot of my constituents don't think that's right. And they think that it's while it may be legal, it's borderline cheating. They feel cheated when their votes are canceled out by people that aren't in their own party. And there were actually quite a few people that sent me copies of their voice machines. They were getting these voicemails from a group encouraging people to do this. And with your leave, Mr. Chairman, I would like to play that voicemail because I think it really gets at the heart of why this bill was drafted and why we need it.
I'm not going to allow you to play the voicemail in committee.
Okay, well,
But you could.
to summarize, it's
send it.
basically, hi, this is so-and-so from such and such a dark money group. And we want to let you know that Wyoming law allows you to change your party affiliation on the day of election. We encourage you to do so. This was made to Democrats and independents to change till they could vote in the Republican primary and the governor's race for a particular candidate. And it just shows you that they knew that we have this loophole in Wyoming law and they were abusing it. And I think this needs to be addressed, and this bill does that. And I think, Republicans should vote in Republican primaries, Democrats should vote in the Democrat primaries, and the independents and unaffiliated, they will wait till the general election since they don't have a party affiliation and pick from those two candidates. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll cut it short. I know there's a lot of people that want to testify, so I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Senator, before we go, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that before you start a game, you may want people to pick what team they're on, kind of get that idea basically. How does this affect new voters? If I'm a first-time voter, I just haven't thought through exactly how it works. Will I be required to register if I want to register for a party by May?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. And that's something that was thought of in the drafting of this bill. This doesn't affect new registration. So if you are newly registered, you haven't never voted before and haven't registered, you can still register on the day of. If you show up and you want to come vote for the first time, this doesn't change any of that. So you wouldn't be locked out. This is only for changing or newly declared. If you've already registered, but you haven't declared a party, or if you registered and declared a party, this is what that bill addresses.
Further questions? All right, public comment, please come on up. There's a few of you, so if you can kind of get in line so we can move down the line as we go. And I think we have 10 folks online. So what we want to do is try to get all the public comments before 2 o'clock because we have to go back into session. So we want to just get everyone the opportunity to speak so that no one feels left out. Okay, go ahead, Kai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kai Schoen, State Election Director in the Secretary of State's office. Senate File 97, it's a bill that Senator Beitman did work with our office on the language as well as with the county clerks. As written, it can be administered. There is a fiscal impact, as you're probably aware on that, to our office to the tune of $12,540, which would be used in the off year. So in 2023, to modify our statewide voter registration system, as well as our statewide electronic poll book, to make necessary changes there to prohibit the activity that this bill prohibits voters from doing when registered. And with that, I would certainly answer any questions the committee may have for me.
I'm not sure I got that last comment. So how soon can you implement it is the question?
Mr. Chairman, excellent question. So the bill as written can be administered. It would be through policy. It would be through training to not allow currently registered voters to change their party within that prohibited period, which is the day of the candidate filing period through the day of the primary election. So it would have to be administered by the poll workers at the polls or within the county clerk's office if they're coming into the office in that period of time. The reason for the 2023 appropriation is that during an election year, we don't open up our election systems for code changes. They're in a code freeze. And so that's why the appropriation was listed for 2023 to make those changes.
Okay, questions for Kai? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, apologize to get hung up on this issue, Mr. Sean. So page 2, line 22 and 23, where it says, for a primary election, an elector may declare or change party affiliation. And then it goes on to say you have to do it by May, essentially. So for a first-time voter, if I've never voted before, I'm a resident of Wyoming, I'm over 18, I've never voted before, I want to register, and I do it on election day, can I get a major party ballot or not?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stitt, thanks for asking the question again, because I think it really should be clear what this bill is doing. And so for new registrations, if you're 18 or whatever your age may be, it does not affect election day registrations. You could register, choose your party on election day. It still keeps that intact.
Okay, further questions for Kyle? Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So on that subject, if you moved from one county where you were registered, want to register in a different county, that's not a new registration and the system can distinguish?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwartz, excellent question. So if you're a currently registered voter in County A and you move to County B, that registration will be treated as a new registration.
So I guess the question is that it would only be treated as that if you and your rules and regulations set that out. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, no, that's just in the way the statutes are currently written. It wouldn't change that process.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure of. Okay, please go ahead. State your name and.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mary Langford and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of the state of Wyoming. And I'm here today for the purpose to focus on the administration of Wyoming elections, and particularly relating to the change in party affiliation. Clerks have had the opportunity to review this proposed legislation and would be able to administer it. With that, the County Clerks Association takes no position on this bill, and I would be happy to stand for any questions.
So does the county clerks have any recommended changes that would facilitate your operations or clarifications to make it easier for you to administer?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe so at this time. We were involved in the language change that occurred on page 3 on the Senate side. So I think we're fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we'll start down here and move this way, just so we be consistent. Please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Kathy Russell. I'm a citizen of Cheyenne, Wyoming. I am a past precinct committee woman, a past vice chairman, chairman, and state committee woman of the Republican Party. I have seen this from many different angles in more recent years from a statewide perspective. The title of the statute that this affects is called nomination by ballot. It's under the political party section, the title. The objective is that it was to make it simple for the parties to nominate their person to represent them. With the switching that goes on, right now, we do not have a clear picture of the party's intentions in terms of nomination. We know, and it was indicated earlier, not just from official records, but conversations that are overheard, conversations that are overt, that party switching is a tactic being used not just here, but all over the nation to stymie the political process of the political parties. There are people who brag about the number of parties votes that they can switch by going in and registering for the primary. In other states, this is not how candidate selection goes. This is not unique to Wyoming, but it is unusual that a party selects their candidate on a ballot. What this has done is confuse the issue of election and has caused many people to question this process and how well it represents or doesn't represent election integrity in our state. This is something we have wanted, Republicans have wanted done for a long time. Let's shut this down. Let's make it a party nomination, not a public, whoever you are, come in and register and join in. There's a specific reason why you join a party. It's the first way you vet a candidate. And so right now, what we have is nomination by crapshoot, not nomination by ballot. When we do not restrict who can vote or how, at what point they can say they are a member of that party with almost no qualifications. So I would ask you please to vote for this, let it come to the floor, go to debate and vote. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a correction. Article 2 that we're talking about here is nomination by primary election, not nomination by ballot.
Okay.
Mis-
Yeah, you may comment.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's Title 22, Chapter 5. It's nomination by election, by primary election. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, please proceed.
Gail Simmons. I'm a resident of Sheridan County, and I am also Civics 307, a nonpartisan blog on the legislature. So a couple of things. The stated problems, Mr. Chair, that this is to address, if I've got it right, is to address same-day changes, interference in nominations, cancellation of votes, gaming the system, and influencing the outcome. And there is also going through many of the previous statements, a press release that was made by the sponsor and Facebook posts by the Republican Party. There's also a concern about actions being nefarious rather than just a concern about electing. And that's particularly by the Dems. So I provided to you a handout. This was done from the 2020 elections. And what this does is it takes basically from the general election of 2018, the April 1, 2020 registrations, and compares those at the voter ID level to the individuals who are listed as having voted in the 2020 primary. And then it compares again at the voter ID level to what their registration was in the system as of the general election of 2020 and in January of 2021. And by doing that, I could get a pattern of what the changes were from basically almost over a 2-year period of time. And what this shows you is kind of the movement of voters. And I think what's particularly interesting about this is also in keeping with what the Secretary of State's office found in 2018 when there was a concern expressed about crossover voting. In fact, what you see is that the largest number is from unaffiliated to Republican. The second largest is actually Republican to Democrat. And then only third is their Democrat to Republican. And what this shows, you can see from the double-edged or double arrows, is that when people change affiliation, they stay. So in 2018, from the Secretary of State's office, the number of people within that period of time, July to September 2018, of the total number that changed any kind of affiliation or declared an affiliation, if they were unaffiliated, the total was 515 that went D to R back to D in that period of time. That's 0.4% of the ballots. So it is, while there might be a lot of communications, Mr. Chairman, the truth is that it's not translating into actions. And by no means do I think that it's appropriate to change party and vote for no other reason than to try to mess with somebody else's nominations. My point is that the data shows that that's not happening. More importantly, the way to make sure that there is no effect is to dilute the votes that occur. So I want to point out that in 2020, and this is similar to what happened in 2018, the total number of registered Democrats at the beginning of August in 2020 was 42,587. That's the total number of registered Democrats. On election day, 2020, 53,420 registered Republicans stayed home. So if the parties, and I would expect that both parties should do this, if they would do a get out the vote, then there is no way that any party switching could have an impact on the outcome other than by those folks who are already registered Republicans. Furthermore, in both 2018 and 2020, only 31.5% of eligible citizens vote in the primary, less than 1/3. And yet in the legislature, 63%, which includes both Republicans and Democrats, 63% of the 75 positions were decided in the primary. So again, Mr. Chairman, I would not ever recommend a change in party, but I believe that what's actually happening is that people look around and they say, well, if that person is a Republican and I appreciate and I want them to be in that office, then I must be a Republican too. And I would guess that maybe 1% of registered Republicans have ever even read the platform of the party. They just know they want small government and they want government to stay out of their business. And in that case, they are considering themselves Republicans. So if in fact this bill, Mr. Chairman, was to stop that last minute same day voting, then why doesn't it just do that? Why not just have a bill that says, you know what, you cannot change, if you're an already registered voter, you cannot change when you either request an absentee ballot or you go to the polls and ask for a ballot. If that was truly the problem, why go back all the way to before and really prevent the people who say, this is about relationships. This isn't about some platform that we haven't really read. And then I also want to point out in summary, Mr. Chair, that while we are partially open, I believe that there was an email that came out, North Dakota and Montana both have open primaries. It doesn't matter what you're affiliated. Nebraska has nonpartisan for some of their state, and all of their legislators are nonpartisan. And they also have a top two open going to the general. In Utah, where that is partially closed, the parties can state if they will allow unaffiliated to come in. And so in those three, it's South Dakota, Idaho, and Utah. There are no closed primaries anywhere around us. And then finally in Colorado, it's open to unaffiliated. So those who don't like the parties, but may like the party principles, may be unaffiliated and they go on. So my summary is that changes in affiliation are overwhelmingly permanent. This bill would actually encourage changes prior to 12 May, which is the day before people can file. So it actually encourages the exact action that has been stated they don't want to have. The only way to stop this in a state that's as independent-minded and who cares about relationships, Mr. Chairman, is to remove the incentive. And that would require open primaries with a party caucus and then it could be controlled. And with that, I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, please go ahead. So we've got basically about 15 minutes. So try to keep it short if you can. I mean, we can come back on adjournment and take all public testimony. I don't want to shut anybody down. Go ahead.
I'll be pretty quick. I am actually, thank you, Chairman and committee for letting me speak today. I am a voter here in Laramie County. I am actually a busy single mom, and I almost didn't vote in the 2020 elections because I didn't have childcare. Sure. My name is Angela Sylvester, sorry.
Thank you, Angela.
And so I try to vote whenever I can. And it would be a huge inconvenience to try and make sure that I am registered months before an election or a primary. And I don't like to vote along party lines. You know, I like to vote for who I think would be the best person. And I don't think this bill would allow me to do that. So again, please vote no on this bill, Senate number 97. Thank you. I will stand for it.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, please go ahead. And identify yourself first.
My name is Vicki Swenson, and I am a retired Wyoming elementary education teacher. And all my years, I was blessed to spend in Wyoming schools. And I just want to mention that citizen responsibilities always had a very important place in our classroom, whether I had first graders or fifth or sixth or gifted education kids. So this is a issue that's very dear to my heart. And what I would like to do, Chairman and committee members, is offer two premises for my testimony for Senate File 97. As simplistic as it sounds, I believe that is the responsibility of lawmakers in very basic terms to pass laws that fix things that aren't working, to pass laws in areas that make things better, and to prevent problems before they happen. So what does this bill fix that needs to be fixed for Wyoming citizens? And how does it improve things? Well, and secondly, I believe that it is Wyoming lawmakers' responsibility to make sure that laws are not passed that benefit one group of people over other groups. I'm aware that rarely, if ever, is that easy for you to do, but as much as possible, that is the right way to govern. This bill, if passed into law, would require that voters would have to decide which party to register for before they knew who the candidates were. A lawmaker from the other chamber was quoted as saying, "That's the point. That's the exact practice I'm trying to stop." I don't think it's fair. I would pose the opposite. It certainly is fair that voters are not required to register before the primary. Why? Well, first of all, Wyoming voters tend to vote for the candidate, not the party. So registering with a party before knowing the candidates and what they stand for is not going to work for them, not if they want to be a responsible voter. I know many people who do not identify as a Republican, a Democrat, a constitutionalist, or a libertarian. In fact, there are over 35,000 voters in this state who are registered as unaffiliated voters. This bill says they will not have the right to vote for the candidate of their choosing because they did not know which party to register for before the deadline. That is not fair. Wyoming taxpayers, the voters, pay for the elections. Parties do not pay for the elections. Yet, if Senate File 97 were passed into law, your neighbors' right to vote for whoever they decide is the best candidate would become subordinate to political party agenda. That is not fair. This bill shines the light on outside voices, seeking to influence Wyoming laws, and also makes apparent to me that some personal agendas are at play. Both are not right. Please trust voters in Wyoming to make voting decisions that are good and are right for Wyoming. Please do it as responsible, purposeful, and right. Please vote no on Senate File 97. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and my concerns about this bill.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions? All right, let's go to Steve.
Good morning or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee. Just a few thoughts on Senate File 97. Gail did a wonderful job on my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, can we have his name?
P. Dillaway.
Thank you.
Served with you, Mark. Representative Kinnear. Anyway, couple things. Open primaries, it's been talked about. This bill has been back and forth 3 or 4 or 5 times. Open primaries is one way of taking care of it. The second thing is I certainly disagree with going back 3 or 4 months prior to filing, especially Mr. Chairman, maybe you're not going to run or you will run. I'd like to know before I have to file, or if I want to change, maybe I want to change to be a Democrat, or I want to stay as a Republican. Having to figure that out before even there's a filing, I think that's wrong. The other thing that I think is absolutely ridiculous is that it's going to, if I want to change, that I have to go to the county clerk, I have to get a notary public, and I don't even know whether there are notary publics available anymore. This is a great way to stop people from voting. And I think this is wrong. We need to have more people vote. And I think this bill has been back and forth. It's a problem searching for an answer. And we've got people from out of state saying, Wyoming, you got to do it this way. Come on, Wyoming. That's not the way to do things. If we're going to do it, let's do it our own way, do it the correct way, and not have somebody outside of the state telling us we've got to do it this way. It's ridiculous to have people from the out of state telling us that we don't know how to run our elections. We do. Let's do them right. Let's do them the correct way. Let's not have it 4 months before the filing or months before the filing. This bill is not ready for prime time. Let's just leave it in the drawer, bring it back, and start over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate your comments. Okay, please identify yourself. And if anyone else wants to testify, come on up to the chairs. If not, we'll start taking testimony off the screen. So go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Mike Lindsay from Laramie County.
Welcome, Mike.
Recent Wyoming resident, moved from Minnesota. After I left the military, we moved to Minnesota when I got hired by Northwest Airlines because my wife and I couldn't agree where to live. She's an urban person and I'm a rural person.
Well, we like your choice.
So we raised our kids there and then we left as soon as we could. And I'd like to speak in favor of this bill for the following couple of reasons. Number one, let's talk about unaffiliated voters. If you're unaffiliated, it means you don't give a crap one way or the other. You're going to make up your mind later. If I'm unaffiliated with Sam's Club, I'm not allowed to walk in. If I'm unaffiliated with the National Organization of Women, I'm not allowed to vote. If you want to participate, then you need to affiliate. Number two, somebody mentioned Colorado being an open primary. Currently, there's a lawsuit to close the primary because they say it violates the Constitution, freedom to assemble and freedom to associate. They're allowing people that aren't in your group to come in and try to influence. And thirdly, let me give you a little bit of an example of, I came from an open primary state in Minnesota. My wife and I were deeply involved in politics there. She is elected official, me as a party hack. You name the job in the party, I had it other than state party chairman. In their primary system, If you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you vote on this side of this paper. Want to vote in the Republican primary, you vote on this side of the paper. Well, it just so happened, I'm personally familiar with my wife's campaign, where in the primary, she got defeated. But it's interesting that if you look at the ballots where there was a vote for all of the people on the Republican side that were running, and then tally up the votes for all the people on the Republican side that were running, but only had one vote against her. They only voted for one person. I cannot say that those were Democrats that moved over to vote against her. I can say that there was an active teachers union campaign to do that. But if you were to throw out those votes, she would have won handily. Minnesota has many other problems with voting, goes beyond the scope of this bill. But the point of the matter is, if we are going to, if in fact there is a difference between Democrats and Republicans, then Democrats and Republicans ought to elect Democrats and Republicans and argue over the difference. I agree with the gentleman who said, we want people to vote. Vote. If you're interested, but want to vote in the primary, then you better affiliate. Vote in the general election for the guy and the girl who is best suited for you. But there's no way we should let a Republican influence a Democrat party's candidacy or a Democrat influence Republican Party's candidacy. Take your sides, let the people decide which side is right. Don't try to imbalance the scales. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, let's keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Marguerite Herman, I'm here for the League of Women Voters, and I'll be extremely brief. You are hearing about Senate File 97 from a range of perspectives with motives explicit and implicit. I speak for the League of Women Voters of Wyoming, whose objective has been and always will be an informed and engaged electorate, which includes participating in primary and general elections. We support the widest possible access to the ballot box by all qualified electors. And we think those electors should be able to choose the people to lead their government at any time in the campaign. The League opposes Senate File 97 because it wants to restrict both the informed, before there's a slate, and engaged, vote for the party, not the candidate, part of that objective. We continue to learn about candidates and partisan politics right up to Election Day. This is a publicly conducted and publicly funded election in a state where we understand that a primary often is the election. Other states have their own issues that drive their own way of handling changing registrations, when, how, et cetera. But instead of trying to find a state to copy, please decide what is best for Wyoming and her voters. Please oppose Senate File 97.
Thank you, Marguerite. All right, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm in support of Senate File 97. There's a couple of things going on.
Could you please state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Okay.
missed that. Nina Weber, Cody, Wyoming.
Thank you, Di. Go ahead.
There's a big grassroots effort going all across our state right now. Many of the local parties are having their county caucuses and county conventions. And one of the biggest issues across our state is we want to have election integrity and security. Many of the county Republican parties have already passed resolutions to stop crossover voting, including here. Laramie County Republican Party passed a resolution yesterday.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, were you calling on me? We can't hear anything going on in the House appropriations. Okay, okay. Yeah, we can't hear anything. We lost sound with the last person who was testifying. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry it's taking so long. My name is Christy Garretts, and my husband and I have lived in Wyoming for 45 years. We live in Campbell County, and we have voted consistently. I'm here to ask you to vote no on Senate File 97. It's a bill that was written, like Vicki said, to correct a problem that is not there. It would create a lot of confusion and disenfranchise many voters, precisely when we should be trying to get more people to the polls. It is difficult enough to get to the polls to vote when one is a working parent, like Angela said, needing to pick up children from childcare or school and getting home to feed a hungry family after a long day of work. When the courthouse hours do not accommodate working families by being open after normal business hours, it makes it very difficult to make a separate trip to register with a party during one's workday. You have to show up with a picture ID to change your party affiliation. It's impossible to work out in the oil field or at a coal mine and make it to the office. The way the bill is currently written, you have to change party affiliation by May 11th, which is before they even start taking registrations for candidates. We don't know in Campbell County often until the last day on May 27th, who all is going to be running for different local offices. We are not gaming the system. We are not nefarious. We are trying to have a say in who will be governing us. In Campbell County, most of the elections are decided with the primary. As a poll worker, I experienced an independent gentleman come in and he wanted to vote. And we said, you know, as an independent, you have no say in any of the elections. And we suggested that he change to Republican so he could have a say. He refused, and once he saw the ballot and saw that there was nothing he had a say in or that he could vote on, he grew angry, tore up his ballot, put it in the trash, and walked out. If this bill is passed, the elections clerk will have a huge task ahead of them to educate the voters and candidates about these proposed changes. And there's no way that they will be able to reach everyone in 2 months' time. The electorate may not be motivated to even pay attention to the proposed changes. After all, the elections are still months away. I stand for questions. Thank you. Ron, I think they're trying to say you should go next. But we can't hear
and
you.
then let me know if I'm supposed to go. Yeah, because I'm supposed to go too. So go ahead, Rod, and then let me know.
Yeah.
House Appropriations, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm Ron Smith and from Powell, and I'm asking you to vote no on Senate File 97. My wife and I have voted in every primary and general election in Wyoming for the last 42 years. And what seems to be lost in some of the proponents' arguments is that more and more of the local and statewide elections are decided in the primaries. In Park County, all of the state offices and the county commission candidates were Republican. If we had not registered as Republicans, we would have had absolutely no one to vote for. Of course, the reason for that is the ratio of registered Republicans to Democrats has increased from 1.3 to 1 in 1980 to 4 to 1 in 2021. And in Park County, where we live, that ratio has risen to 8.5 to 1. So that disparity makes it difficult for the minority party or independents to field viable candidates. Sometimes we've registered as Democrats and sometimes as Republicans, depending on the choices. But by design, Senate File 97 would not allow us to make these informed choices since it forces party declaration before official disclosure of the candidates. It would almost certainly lower voter turnout in the primaries, potentially disenfranchising undeclared registrants and the 31% of Wyoming voters currently registered as Democrat, Independent, or Libertarian. And if the Democrats became the majority party in Wyoming, Republican voters would be equally marginalized. Regardless of a candidate's party, open primaries encourage accountability to the whole political spectrum, not just to the partisan extremes. I believe SF 97 would suppress competition and aggravate the drift toward political extremes. Thank you.
Okay, I noticed I was just asked to unmute, so hopefully I'm next. I'd like to keep this brief. You may have read my editorial before.
You are.
As an absentee voter, I would have missed the last election. Much of my time has been on a ranch. This would have been horrible. I like to vote for the person. This would rule that out. Now, one of my friends and clients happens to be the mayor of a city of 3 million people. He's a sociology professor, past secretary general of his National Assembly. Very brilliant man. We've been talking about this and a few other things we talk every week. He believes the strength of America is the fact that we don't jump to changes. We're slow and deliberate, and we pay a lot of attention to our Constitution. To me, this is jumping to change a problem that's not really even there. And it's because of one individual who is throwing away our whole history of smooth transition of power, trying to be an autocrat. This is a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. If you care about your constituents, about getting people to vote, please, please, please vote no.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Ann Tollefson, and members of the committee, I was asked to unmute, so I really appreciate being able to testify today. After 35 years of voting in Natrona County, I've retired to Sheridan County. And I'm here to plead with you to vote no on Senate File 97. It's just not the Wyoming way to restrict freedom of access and choice. And Senate File 97 does that. Why change it when it goes against our core values? And I have to tell you, I spent much of my life in Natrona County. I earned 2 degrees from the University of Wyoming. And I've always bragged to outsiders that Wyoming residents have great access to voting, even registering the day of an election. Senate File 97 would change that. I have to remind you, I shouldn't have to, that Wyoming is a very rural state and many residents live far from their county courthouse. For me, for example, I'm 5 minutes from my local polling place, but I'm an hour and a half round trip to the county courthouse. And as a senior, that's a problem. And I'm not trying to game the system. It should be my right as a citizen of Wyoming to choose the issues and the candidates I think are best and most important for the future of our state and be able to vote on them with the fewest restrictions. And I find this bill abhorrent and I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
I've been asked to unmute. I'm Linda Fleming, and I'm from Baggs, Wyoming. I served 14 years as a Carbon County Commissioner, and our a very rural county with probably 9 different communities. We know that the county commissioner race is not as political as at the state or national races are. We tend to vote for the candidate that best meets the needs of our county. And by having this clear to May type of registration It is even before the candidates are declared. It is not good for the elections that are closest to the people, the county commissioner races. I stand for question. Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, and committee members, I don't know if you're still there. It's after 2:00, but I'm going to go ahead since I was asked to unmute. I am Deborah East, a 43-year voting resident of Fremont County. I am testifying in opposition to Senate File 97. This is a bill that does not provide a solution to an existing problem. I'm very concerned about how this runs counter to the respect of Wyoming neighbors. When we rely on each other in an emergency or for collaborative needs, building cooperation is essential. This bill does not do that. This legislation dismantles voters' value as a neighbor. In this poem, offered from a friend who's an author of it, it shows respect about good neighbors. And I think it's a good point to summarize what's happening today. He jumpstarts my frozen pickup. I feed his snowbound stock. We hate each other's votes, but in the spring we mend fences anyway. This bill is not a fence mending bill at all. People have already spoken about how it excludes voters, and I won't repeat that. What I do want to underscore is that election refinement should cultivate understanding of critical dates, voter access, and voter engagement. This bill runs voters into narrow branding chutes for a count or not including them at all. As one of your neighbors, I ask committee members to vote no on this measure, and I will send my testimony to each of you for your convenience. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Lisa Smith. I was asked to unmute, so I'll jump in quickly. Thank you, Chairman Nicholas, for allowing me to speak. As I said, my name is Lisa Smith. I'm from Casper. I'm a Wyoming native and have lived here my whole life. I'm respectfully requesting that you vote no on Senate File 97. My opinion is mostly based on my voting experiences here in Wyoming, and I've been a voter since 1983, long enough to have voted for Ed Herschler, Jim Geringer, Alan Simpson, Mike Sullivan. Of all of my votes over the years, I'm highlighting these because I feel like they show the political diversity that was a strength of our state. My parents taught me to vote for the people that I thought were the best candidate and those that met the needs of our state in the best way possible, not so much by party. It's my belief that, like cream, the good candidates will rise to the top, and that is integrity, not a false integrity of like the lack of voting integrity that this is supposed to address. I believe it's my right and all voters' rights to be able to vote freely for the candidates they want. And I'm insulted by people saying that our existing system encourages cheating. Like others have said, I feel like Wyoming's elections have been and still are primarily decided in the primaries. And I feel like the gentleman from Wisconsin, he said that you should pick an affiliation. Well, I don't think that people, and I think with the voting chute or the branding chute analogy, it's the same thing. I don't think that people's beliefs are so simple. It's not a simple platform like a one-level porch on your house, but it's more like a multi-level deck. And this kind of voting system does not allow for any kind of subtlety of thought. And it just strips voters of their right to register at the polling place, and it unfairly limits their ability to exercise their voting rights as Americans. And as others have said, that asking them to register in May, even before they know the candidates, is asking people to vote blind. And that, in my mind, is irresponsible and goes against everything I was ever taught in civics class to do all of the research. Over the years, I've relied on the newspapers, in their own words, interviews with candidates to help me make decisions on my votes. I take it very seriously and try to pick people that I think represent my needs and the needs of my neighbors. And that was only ever released like the Sunday before the primary votes, not months ahead. And I really think that it should match the needs of the state. If you've ever planned a wedding or a party in this state, you should know that Wyomingites don't even RSVP for a wedding, let alone register months and months in advance. It's not that they're willfully rude. It's that maybe they see themselves as independent. Maybe we're spoiled. We can get somewhere in 5 minutes and don't worry about traffic jams. Why do we have to plan ahead? I just think it's kind of who we are. And as others have said, many of us feel like we are independent, unaffiliated. And does that mean that you don't deserve a voice? I don't believe that that's true. And I just think we want to have as many of our citizens' needs and votes represented. And that's the whole purpose of our whole process. And I think the most punitive part is the part that no one's really mentioned yet, is if citizens miss voting in one election, they'll automatically be purged from the voter rolls. And that purge plus the requirement to vote months ahead is just an unfair equation for Wyoming voters. I think of my own life. 2 years ago, I was working full-time. Both of my parents died within a span of 2 months. And between working full-time, dealing with grief, being in just a mental fog, trying to manage hospital visits, and teaching 120 middle school students every day, I can tell you that during that time, registering to vote was not foremost in my mind. I still would have voted, but if I had let something lapse, I would have appreciated the right to go to the polls and make it work. In short, and it hurts my English teacher heart to say it, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The proposed changes are unnecessary, and it's an unnecessary expenditure, even though $12,500 is chump change, I suppose, in the scheme of things. It's still an unnecessary expenditure. Thanks for listening to my concerns, and I'm open for questions.
I will jump in if I can. My name is Jessica Henry. I am a voter in Natrona County. I was born, raised, and educated in the state of Wyoming. I'm what you would call an independent voter. And this is the reason that I ask you to vote no on Senate File 97. This is a bill that would restrict voting rights during primaries, and we need to encourage voter turnout, not suppress it. I've always appreciated being able to vote the day of the primaries because I vote based on who appeals to my needs as a Wyoming citizen. I don't just vote for a particular party. We live in the equality state, and I'm proud of that moniker, but I feel that this bill will crush that idea. And we're better than that. Wyoming is better than that. Senate File 97 would make it almost impossible for me and a lot of others to vote in primaries. Voters would be stifled, and that's not what we stand for, and it's not what we need. So please vote no on Senate File 97. Protect voters' rights, protect the ability for them to register on the day of the primary election, and keep Wyoming the equality state that we've always been. Thank you for listening. I'll keep it short. I really appreciate the chance to talk today. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you to Chairman Nicholas and the committee for the opportunity to speak and give input on Senate File 97. My name is Chuck Harris, and I've been a registered voter in Teton County and have participated in every opportunity to vote by local, state, and national issues in the last 40 plus years. This has been my right, my privilege, and my responsibility as a Wyoming resident. And now from within, there's a risk to my freedom as a voter, an attempt to solve a problem that does not exist. Over these many years, I've been able to vote for the issues and the candidates that are deserving of my support and that I feel are most important for our future in the state. Suddenly, that's at risk in the form of Senate File 97, which would clearly take away the opportunity to vote for the candidates and the issues that affect my family, my community, and my state. This is not a partisan issue, and though I have been a registered Republican more often than not, I voted as appropriate on all the issues. I deserve the opportunity to vote for Democratic candidates and issues as well. To restrict this freedom is wrong in every way and is the antithesis of what we stand for in Wyoming. Asking us to choose a party in May, far in advance of some candidates even announcing their run for office, is clearly wrong. Many of the most important discussions about candidate views, competency for office, and discussions about the ballot issues themselves come in a few months before the election. Wyoming voters should be able to hear about the candidates and the issues that they will choose to support at the ballot box on election day. Senate File 97 would restrict that. It would further limit those voters who did not register back in May and penalize voters who miss a vote or have not yet made up their mind about candidates and issues. Again, not the Wyoming way. Voter freedom in Wyoming reflects our values. Creating legislation that seeks to solve a problem that does not exist is not what we are asking of you in the legislature. These voter restrictions are wrong for all of us. I know time is short, but I would like to make one last comment. Today is March 7th, and as you consider this bill, we as Americans all remember and consider the 57th anniversary of the Selma March for Voting Rights in America. It was an important part in a long and bloody battle to enable Black Americans to have the right to vote, and Americans chose to have all voters expanded access to registration and the ability to vote. We became a better and stronger country as more, not fewer of us, achieved the right to register and vote for the candidates and issues of our choice. I ask you to vote no on its Senate File 97. Thank you again for allowing my testimony, and I would be glad to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for the opportunity to testify against Senate File 97 via the internet. My name is Marcella Shaver, Wyoming bred and born, currently living in Goshen County. And I find it ironic that the hearings on this bill are being held on 307 Day, the day we celebrate Wyoming and all that we stand for, the freedoms and the liberties that we so treasure. This bill would severely limit one of those basic values, our freedom to vote for the person of our choice in the primary of our choice. Now, I, like so many other youngsters, left Wyoming when I was 19 with my newly minted sailor husband. And after service around the world and on both coasts and Hawaii, we returned 45 years later to a far different Wyoming than we had left. I actually experienced culture shock akin to what I experienced when we went to Germany, because somewhere in those 45 years, the politics went from inclusion to exclusion. I used to actually brag about our wonderful, same-day registration voting that we had, which kept us at the top of the scorecards for good voter participation and everything. But this bill, if it were enacted, would plummet us to the bottom of the barrel on that one. And that is not a selling point when you're trying to encourage investment and people to come to our state. Now, I believe that democracies seek to expand rights for citizens and that any bill or law that seeks to curtail, limit, or strip rights from any citizens or group of citizens defies the very definition and deserves to be defeated. This is one of a few bills that have hit this legislature this session. I ask that you vote a resounding, deafening no on Senate Bill File 97. Thank you.
I was asked to unmute.
They just asked me to unmute. Huh?
You don't know if it's a session anymore. Patricia, have you had a chance to speak yet? If not, go
No.
ahead.
Can I
Go
go
ahead.
ahead?
Please.
Okay, thank you very
Go ahead.
much. First of all, thank you, Chairman Nicholas and committee members for allowing me to speak. My name is Patricia Johnson. I'm a registered Republican in Bighorn County, and I've given this a great deal of thought. I would like to read my reasons for taking the time to be here today. I'm here to ask you to vote no on Senate File 97 for the following 3 reasons. 1, I feel voting in a representative democracy should be as hassle-free as possible. Since registered in 1975, I have found that to be the case in Wyoming. Wyomingites have not had to jump through hoops to use their right to vote. We know when the primary is, and we go vote on that day. Second, it appears to me by choosing party affiliation by the May deadline, I am voting for the party, not necessarily the candidate I feel most represents me. As a Wyoming voter, number 3, I'm really curious as to why SF 97 didn't go through the Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee, and instead was sent to the Agriculture Committee. And now in the House, it bypassed the Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee and is now with you in the Appropriations Committee. I assume it must be controversial, another reason to vote no. And after listening to the first 2 bills that were discussed today, it was made perfect sense to me why you were listening to those people talk about appropriations. And I'm just confused as to why this particular file was in your committee. For these 3 reasons, ease of voting, choosing party affiliation too early, and the file being tossed from committee to committee, I would like you to vote no. And I thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I have no idea why I'm not even showing up. I mean, it says my name, but there's no picture or anything. I assume you can't see me. No. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. I see you shaking your head and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I have already made a message. Did you hear me, or I was asked to unmute again? Okay, thank you.
I wonder why they couldn't see me.